Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom from the holy city of Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Today, the 15th day of the month of Iyar, of the year 5778, the 30th day of the Omer. Already 4 weeks and the better part of 2 days have passed. 30th of April, with Lag BaOmer ahead of us on Wednesday evening, 2nd of May, and Thursday. Looking forward to Shavuot on May the 20th, God willing. And we are doing our part today in continuing with our acceptance of the Holy Torah, chapter by chapter and section by section. Today coming to a very interesting section of the prophet Haggai, which we'll come to presently. Just a note on added significance of today in the time of the children of Israel being in the wilderness after leaving Egypt. Just 1 month after leaving Egypt, the supply of the unleavened bread that they had hastily baked and taken out of Egypt was finished on the 15th of Iyar, and it was on that day facing the wilderness with no food that they called it out, and it was then that God answered them on the following day with the miracle of the manna. So today indeed is a day for, with God's help, initiating in a non-complaining way, but in a way of gratitude and prayer for the future livelihood for ourselves together with all of Israel. With that then, let us turn to our study today of the prophet Haggai. Shalom, today the 15th day of the month of Iyar of the year 5778, corresponding to the 30th of April. It is the 30th day of the Omer count. And today in our study of the prophet Haggai, we come to the concluding sections in chapter 2, verses 10 through 23. And the first section that we shall be looking at today is one in which the prophet received prophecy again on a very significant date, on the 24th day of the month of Kislev, the same year that he had previously prophesied about the time being ripe for the continuation and completion of the building of the second temple. And now the prophet begins to address what is going to be happening in the temple, and the central activity in the temple day by day was the offerings by the priests of the regular sacrifices, the daily sacrifices, the additional sacrifices of Sabbaths, of new moons, and of festivals, and other sacrifices that are laid down in the Torah, and all of the private individual sacrifices that are enumerated in the Torah, from the Olah, burnt offering, through the Chatat, sin offering, the Shlamim, peace offering, the Todah, thanksgiving, the Asham, guilt offering, all of those different offerings which were all in practice in the second temple. And the prophet in our section is addressing the priests to try to demonstrate to them that they are not at all ready for the service of the temple, because they're not familiar with the very intricate laws of purity and impurity that relate specifically in the temple to the sacrificial offerings, the portions that go up on the altar, any portion that have been defiled by some item that causes defilement would be forbidden to put upon the altar, and likewise any of those sacrificial portions that had come into contact with something that would defile them and cause them tum'ah, ritual impurity, it would be forbidden for either the priests to eat the priestly portions or the rest of the people to eat their permitted portions of the sacrifices if they were defiled. And with the help of God, when we complete the prophet Haggai, our next stop will not be the natural next point in the Terei Asa, the 12 shorter prophets, Zechariah, who follows immediately after Haggai, but we shall skip to Malachi, and God willing, we shall, after the completion of Malachi, come to Zechariah. The reason being that there are certain themes that bind Haggai with Malachi, particularly relating to the services in the temple and the attitudes of the people of the time to the service in the temple, that deserve to be examined consecutively one to the other. And that's why we shall, God willing, after Haggai, jump to Malachi, where again the theme of the purity and the perfection of the temple sacrifices and the temple service is a very prominent theme. And now in the section of Haggai that we look at today, we shall see he looks at a very technical aspect of the sacrificial system, this system of purity and impurity. Looking at the Hebrew text of Haggai in chapter 2, starting at verse 10, giving the date stamp of the prophecy, Be'ezerihim ba'arbo'o lateshi'i bishenas shtayim ledor yovesh hoyo devar Adonai el Haggai hanovihi leimor. That same very significant year, the second year of King Dariavesh of Persia, the year in which already the prophet, just prior to the beginning of that, already earlier in the Hebrew calendar, in the month of Elul, on the 24th of Elul, been prophesying about the green light for the temple. Likewise, the previous prophecy was said on the 21st of Tishrei, the climax of the Sukkot festival, the Hoshana Rabbah. Here now in the 24th of the 9th month, another very significant day, because the 9th month is Kislev, and the outstanding miracle of the temple that was coming to be built took place in the month of Kislev on the 25th of the month, when the priests had rest from their enemies. The people had rest from the Yevanim, from the Greeks and the Hellenists in the people. So here on the day which was actually to mark the climax of the battle against the Greek enemies later on in the Second Temple, and the whole Hanukkah miracle was that a single flask of oil was found that was ritually pure. So here we see that the priests in the times of the Hashmonaim, many years after Haggai's prophecy, were absolutely punctilious about only practicing the temple services when all of the materials would be tahor, ritually pure. Here this prophecy comes, as it were, to alert the priests at the beginning of the Second Temple period to this. Here is the body of the prophecy, verse 11. Koi Omar Adonai Tzvahois Sha'aleno Es HaKohanim Torah Leimor. So says the Lord of hosts, ask please the priests for Torah, saying. Of course, the priests are indeed the repository of the Torah in the people. That was the original intention. That was the case both in the First and Second Temple periods. Since the destruction of the Second Temple, it was no longer possible to have only the priests as the teachers of the people, and there was a second category, and those were the Hachamim, the sages, who were not necessarily from the priestly tribe. But this question is specifically addressed to the priests because they would be serving in the temple. And as we look at the Hebrew text here, we must be very, very alert to the nuances that are found in the Hebrew, which will be the key to understanding what exactly Haggai was instructed to ask the priests. And this is given in verse 12. Hein yiso ish besar kodesh bichnaf bigdol ונוגע בכנפו אל הלחם ואל הנוזיד ואל היין ואל השמן ואל כל מאכול היקדוש ויענו הכהנים ויאמרו לו. So here the prophet is asked to evoke a situation where a man is carrying, ostensibly according to the simple translation, sanctified flesh, sacrificial flesh in a fold of his garment, and that fold goes and touches successively some bread, some stew or soup, some wine, some oil, and any other kind of food. The question is, Hayikadosh, will it become sanctified? That is the apparent translation of the verse. Vayanu HaKohanim, the priests answer, no, it would not. We shall come back to this to look at some of the nuances more carefully, but then he asks a second question, verse 13. ויאמר חגי אם ייגע טמא נפש בכל אלה הייתמו ויענו הכהנים ויאמרו ייתמו. The prophet says, if טמא nefesh, something that has defiled through the impurity of a dead body, a dead human body, which is called the tum'ah of a nefesh. When the nefesh, the soul, departs the body communicates defilement. If it was something defiled by contact with the dead that was touching any of the items enumerated in the previous verse, hayitmo, will the last of the items be considered tameh? And the priest answers that indeed yes. Well, the attitude of the prophet to the answers of the priest indicates that they perhaps got it wrong. He does not say so directly. We shall look presently to see did they get it right or wrong. But either way, the result of this test of the priests elicited this very severe response from the prophet, which again is echoed by some of the things that the prophet Malachi, his contemporary, addresses to the priests. Verse 14 of Haggai chapter 2. ויען חגי ויאמר כי הום הזה. I misread that. Let me start again. ויען חגי ויאמר כהין הום הזה. וכן הגוי הזה לפני נאום אדוני וכן כל מעשי ידיהם ואשר יקריבו שם טמאו. The answer that comes from the prophet, the words of the Lord, is that yes, that is what this people are like. They got it wrong. Everything they do, everything they shall be offering there in this temple that is already being rebuilt in front of their eyes, everything there will be tameh, it will be impure because of their lack of grasp of the appropriate laws governing the purity of the sacrifices. Now, the prophet doesn't pursue this theme. He goes on to encourage them to continue with the building of the temple. After this stark warning in the ensuing verses, he says, now look, mark how from this day on, as you build the temple, you will find prosperity in your produce, in your crops. So he does not return to the question, to the knowledge or lack of knowledge by the priests of the laws of purity and impurity. And this is not referred to later on. In the continuation of this prophecy, he successively tells them that the temple is going to be built, and he promises that there will be a victory until at the end of days. He implies, as we shall see at the very end of his prophecy, that God will indeed send the descendant of Zerubbabel, the hero of the building of the second temple, and that will be Tzemach, the Menachem, the Comforter, the Mashiach, for whom we are awaiting. But before we leave this section, let us examine some of the intricacies of the questions which the prophet asked of the priests. And Rashi, in his commentary on this verse, verse 12, quotes a machloket, a division of opinion in the Talmud about which exactly was the question, and did the priest get it right or wrong. And when the verse says that the prophet asked him about basar kodesh, sacrificial or sanctified meat, Rashi explains to us that the concept here of kodesh is this is meat that has been defiled by some form of impurity, such as nevela, that is to say, an animal that was not properly slaughtered and whose cadaver is called nevela, which communicates impurity to any person who touches it, to any food that comes in contact with it. Another form of impurity would be communicated by a sheret, that will be a dead mouse or some other of the 8 creatures that are enumerated in Leviticus in the portion of Shemini that communicate this particular form of impurity called tumas sheretz, the impurity of a creeping being. That is to say that the word kodesh here is to be understood in the way that is understood in some other parts of our Tanakh, where, for example, a kadesha is a woman that is set apart for being a harlot, for being a prostitute. And likewise, a kadesh, which the Torah forbids, would be a male that is immersed in similar immorality. So the term basar kodesh has the connotation in the prophecy of meat that has been defiled. And we are talking about sacrificial meat that has been defiled. And there's a succession of things that the original source of defilement touches, the garment, the corner of the garment, and what the corner of the garment goes on to touch, etc. And Rashi now, in his comment on the closing words of verse 12, the question, will it or will it not be defiled, this succession of things, Rashi here explains, Nechlaku bo Rav u'Shmuel. There was division of opinion between the two Amoraim in Babylon just after the end of the Mishnaic period, Rav and Shmuel. Chad Omar ishtabish kahane. One of them said that in fact the priests, the Kohanim, were indeed mixed up. They got it wrong. Devoy menayu revi bakodesh. Because the question that he asked of them was, is there such a thing as a fourth item in sacrificial foods? They said to him, the fourth thing that gets touched is not defiled, it is considered tahor. That was the opinion of one of those pair of Amoraim, Rav and Shmuel. The other, Chad Omar, the other said, Le'ishtabish kahane. The priests were not confused. He was actually asking them about a fifth item of the that is touched by the item that confers defilement. And the truth is that according to the halachot of Tumah and Tahara, there is no fifth level in Kodesh. Let us just make a digression to understand what is happening here. The conferment of defilement of one item upon another follows what is like a domino theory. That if the item that is the source of defilement, which is called the Av Tumah, the father of Tumah, for example, the piece of nevela, meat unkosher slaughtered, or the sheretz, that Av Tumah, when it touches something else, the second thing will become what is called a Vlad Tumah, the child of the Tum'ah, and that is called a Rishon. The item that conferred the defilement, the Av, the father, has the power to defile not only food, but also it can defile vessels, utensils, clothes, and can also defile a person who touches them. But when it comes to foods, the Av, the father, the item conferring the defilement, touches the velad, the child, the offspring of this, and the velad, the rishon, only has the power now to defile another item of food. It is not considered to have sufficient charge of impurity to defile any more a person or a utensil, but if it comes into contact with another item of food, it will cause that item to become a sheni. And because of the extreme holiness required in the temple, there are these 4 levels of impurity. A sheni, the second item, the item that got its charge of impurity from the valad, from the rishon, from the first. Now the sheni, if we're talking about sacrifices, that's the power to make a shlishi, a third item in this domino process, where the third item has sufficient power to cause a fourth item to become pasul, to become invalid for consumption either on the altar or by the person eating the sacrificial meat. But the fourth item does not have sufficient charge of impurity, even if it is a sacrifice, to cause a fifth level, a fifth victim in the domino collapse. So that is the Machloket, the division of opinion that Rashi quotes here between Rav and Shmuel, where one of them says that if you interpret the words of the verse carefully, you will see there are 4 levels, the 4 levels coming after the original Av Tumah. There is a Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, and Revi, and when the priests answered that it would not become impure, according to the one that considers they got it wrong, they didn't know that there is a 4th level of impurity in the sacrificial system. According to the other opinion of the pair of Rav and Shmuel, that he asked them, is there a chamishi? And if there's a 5th, and they said no, they got it right. Well, now, these are very intricate laws that are all set forth in Maimonides' Code of Torah Law in the section on the laws of ritual purity and impurity, and likewise in the Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah in his commentary on the 6th order of the Mishnah Seder Taharos. The Rambam has a very extensive introduction to the whole order of Taharos dealing with purity and ritual impurity, in which he encyclopedically categorizes all of these different concepts. Before we leave the domino theory relating to sacrificial items, let's just mention that the same domino process applies to terumah, that is the 2% tithe that goes from agricultural produce to the priest, which likewise was food so sanctified that it could be defiled and rendered unfit for consumption by the priest if it came into contact with any source of defilement. And in the case of Terumah, the system is less demanding than that of Kodesh, the sacrificial system of the temple, because in Trumah there are only 3 levels. An Av Tumah will cause a Velad, that is to say a Rishon, a first degree of having received the impurity, which now only has the power to defile a second level of foodstuffs, and then there is a third level in Terumah, which will become pasul, which will become invalidated, but will not have the power to cause any further impurity. There were also in temple times people who were not priests, but who would nevertheless eat their food according to a standard known as Toharas HaKodesh, that they would endeavor that all of the foods they ate had the standards of ritual purity that applied also to sacrificial and temple foods. It's a very extensive and fascinating subject, but let us now go back to the second question, which is asked by Haggai from God to the priests about a second kind of impurity. Verse 13, Haggai says, Im yiga temei nefesh b'chol eileh hayitmor. If something that is temei nefesh, well, the expression temei nefesh has resonances with phrases in the book of Numbers, in the portion of Chukas, speaking about ritual impurity communicated by a dead body, and likewise other sections of Leviticus and elsewhere in the Torah. So the connotation of Tamei Nefesh is somebody that has a level of defilement that has been communicated by a human body or some part of a human body. And here there is a further twist to the subject of Tum'ah and Tahorah, because whereas with all other forms of Tumahs, the fathers, the various different categories, be it a sheret, an unclean creature of certain types, be it nevela, a cadaver improperly slaughtered, be it nida, a woman that is menstrually unclean, or be it a metzorah. In most cases, these are all called av tumas, and in some case they have the ability to communicate impurity, tum'ah, to cause something else also to become an av tumah, to communicate further impurity, such as in the case of a nida woman or a menstruant woman, or a zav, a man with a morbid flow. If they sit on a chair or lie on a bed, that bed also becomes an av tumah, and anything that comes in contact with it will also follow the domino process if it confers defilement something else. But in the case of a human dead body, there is the further level that any corpse or part of a corpse or quantity of human blood or bones, these are called avi avot hatuma. This is the father of the fathers of tuma, and that is because something that has come into contact with a dead body will itself become an av tuma. A person that had direct contact with a body or was under the same roof as the dead body or a part of a body, that person himself becomes an av tuma. And so the body itself is called the avi avot, the father of the fathers. The one that came in contact with the body directly is called the av tuma, and that would apply also to garments that were on the body, other utensils that were in direct contact with the flesh of the body. These are all av tumah, and they then carry through the domino process from Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, depending on whether we're talking about Terumah or in the case of Kodesh, sacrificial items, a Revi, a fourth level. And that is the that is the connotation of the second question that Haggai asks the priests. He says, Im yiga temei nefesh b'chol elu, if it is something that is impure from contact with a dead person, hayitmor, will it be ritually impure. And the priests answer, yes, indeed, it will become impure. I would like just to take a look at the Metzudat David on these verses. Let's look at his comment on verse chapter 2, verse 12. So this is dealing with the first of the question the prophets addressed to the priest. Hey, so if a person is carrying in the fold of his garment meat that is muvdal, that is separated, that's why it's called kodesh, because it's muvdal, separated, mipnei hatumo. If it's been separated on account of the impurity, kesheret unavelo, if it's received its impurity from an unclean creature of the 8 unclean creatures enumerated in the Torah, or nevela, a cadaver of an improperly slaughtered animal, v'noga b'kanfoi. Now this item, that's avtuma, touched the corner of his garment. Now with his garment, which is rishon letumo, it was with that corner of the garment which was in contact with the original avtuma that he touched bread, and if so, the bread became a sheni. Ve'el hanozid, then the stew, that is to say, the bread touches the stew, that if so becomes a shlishi. Ve'al hayayin, and now the shlishi touches wine. The nazid, the stew, comes in contact with some wine, which becomes a revi. And when it comes to the oil, what he wants to say here, oy anozid noga b'shemen, or if the stew touched oil. And this is because of yet another twist in the laws of purity and impurity, that the conferment of impurity by a liquid does not follow the same rules as the conferment of impurity by foodstuffs. And that is another quite complex subject which will not go into details, because Haggai's question of the priest does not really touch that. He is concerned about a revi. The Metzudat David that we are looking at now adopts the view that in fact the priests did get it right, and that his question was to them, is there such a thing as a reveal? Let's follow him through. He says, when it comes to the oil and the wine, they are both mashke, they're both liquids. From the strict text of the Torah, we cannot see the law that they have the power to confer defilement on a second item. Even if it was a rishon, even if a avtuma touched a liquid, according to strict written Torah law, midoraisa, it doesn't have the power to confer impurity further. There are rabbinical enactments that do give liquids very strong powers to confer defilement further, on account of certain liquids like the spit of the saliva of a zav, or the urine of a zav, which are avtuma, and they're liquids, and on account of that the sages decreed impurity even on liquids over and above what is required by Torah law. But here in Haggai's case, he's asking them about the revi. And he goes on, the Metzudat, explaining if all this touched any other food, if the stew touched any other food, hayikdash. The question here is the question of the prophet. That's the question he asked them. If the revi'i becomes mufdal v'tameh, is it separated and therefore impure? That is the connotation of the word yikdash in the Hebrew of the text. They said no. Now, according to this view, I put it wrongly before, be'emes to'u, according to the view that he asked them only about a revi, is there a a fourth level in the domino effect in impurity communicated by sacrificial foods. Here, truly, they made a mistake. In the case of sacrificial items, here he's using kodesh in the rabbinical Mishnaic form, understanding of the word. The revi is also impure. And now, in Metzudas David commentary on the second question, Vayomer Haggai, Hoisif the he went further in testing them. Do they at least know that the shlishi, the third in the domino effect, is impure? If it was something that is tamei nefesh, something that's defilement comes from a nefesh, from a human being, if it touches any of the above, if the succession of contacts one to the other by the above items started off with tumas mace, with some item that is impure on account of defilement from a dead body. Shehu avi avos hatuma, that is the father of the fathers of impurity. V'naseh hakonof avatumo, and therefore the corner of the garment which touches the piece of the dead body, that now itself becomes avtuma, a father of impurity. If so, the lechem, the bread, is the first, the nazir, the stew, is the second, the wine and the oil, that's a third. More, they said, yes, it will become pure. They got the answer right. Yes, indeed, it is impure. Well, perhaps those who deeply yearn for the Holy Temple will be sufficiently inspired by this to seek to become acquainted with some of the intricacies and the mysteries of this subject of ritual purity and impurity. It is indeed, once it begins to grasp something about what it's about, it's a most amazing subject, and all sources of impurity have something to do with the morbid side of life. If it's a dead human body, if it's those symptoms of some morbidity in a metzoira, a leper, or in the case of a zova, a woman with an untimely flow of blood, a nida woman, menstruation is an aspect of the expulsion of an embryo that was not fertilized and is therefore on the side of death, from which there's a need for purification. The same with other forms of impurity, nevela, animal that was not properly slaughtered. All of these have some morbidity about them, and the temple was a place that had to be so holy that it had to be absolutely separated from not only the precincts of the temple, but also the very foods that the priests serving the temple would eat, both in the temple and outside of the temple. And here Haggai's questions to the priests are spurring them on whether they got it right or wrong. This was a big spur to them to go further and get acquainted with the whole system. And with that, let us now go forward and jump forward to verse 15, where after this test and the prophet having told them that, well, if you don't know the laws, everything you do here will be impure, he now leaves that subject and goes on to what is the significance of the entire temple, to bring blessing into the world. Verse 15. V'yato simuno levavachem min hayoyim hazeh v'omolo miterem sum even el even beheichal Adonai. And now pay very careful attention with your hearts from this day, this date, this 24th of Kislev of that month and onwards, before you've even really started to putting stone to build the house. Mehiysam bo el aremas esrim v'yeso asoro bo el hayekev lachsoiv 50 puro v'hoyeso esrim. there's been simply a curse in all of the produce until the temple is standing. People would hope and estimate that they could get a heap of 20 measures, but when they yield it after all the taxes and all the different parasites and others have eaten and everything that is destroyed, everything that goes to waste, there's barely 10. And same with the yekev, the wine vat. The person expected to be able to draw out of their 50 measures, and there's only 20. Verse 17. Hi keisi esechem bashido foin uva yerokoin uva borod eis kol maasei yerechem v'yineschem elai nehu mardoinoi. I've struck you with these different kinds of afflictions. Shidafon is when the crops are battered and beaten by the winds. Yerakon is when they've been afflicted with something that causes them to go pale. All the life goes out of them. There's been hail. This very much reminds of what's been going in the Holy Land just this week with these freak rainstorms and floods, which are taking such a very heavy toll, both on human life, Rahman al-Islam, and on property and possessions, all in a time when we do not have our temple. All the work of your hands, says the prophet, and even with all of these afflictions, these Yisurim, you're still not with me. You're still not returning. So now the prophet gives the good news. Simuno levavachem min hayoim hazeh v'omolo miyom esrim arbo lateshih lemin hayoim asher yusadeich al Adonai simu levavachem. You set your hearts to focus and concentrate that from this very day and forward above, we're constantly going upwards as we advance through time. From this day of the 24th of the 9th month of Kislev, from the day that the sanctuary of the Lord has its foundation established, you pay careful attention. Ha'od hazera b'maguro ועד הגפן והתאנו והרימון ועץ הזית לא ינוסו מן היום הזה אבורך. In this verse we have specifically the fruits for which the land of Israel is praised. 6 out of the 7, only the tamar, the palm date, is missing. But while the seed is still in the granary, and that would include chita and seorah, wheat and barley, and while as yet the vine and the fig and the pomegranate tree and the olive tree have not borne their fruits, from this day shall I give you blessing, from the day of the building of the temple. And now we come to the conclusion of the prophecy of Haggai, looking now in a great sweep across the history of the second temple that was to be built from that day on. The same day came prophecy a second time to the prophet. Vayehi devar Adonai shenis el Haggai be'esreim ve'arbo lachodesh leimor. The word of the Lord came a second time to Haggai that very great day, the 24th of the month mentioned above, La Chodesh, to the month, that is the month previously mentioned in our text, namely the 9th month of Kislev. And the message is to the line of King David, to the Messianic king. Emor el Zerubbabel pachas Yehudo lemor ani marish es hashomayim v'es ha'oretz. Speak to Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah. I am going to be shaking the heavens and the earth. Verse 22. V'hofachti kisei mamlochois, v'hishmadati choizek mamlochois hagoyim, v'hofachti merkovo v'roicheveho, v'yoredu susim v'roichvayhem, ish b'cherev ochiv. God promises, I shall be overturning the throne of the empires. I will destroy the strength of these kingdoms and empires of the nations, and I shall overturn the Merkava, the chariot, v'roichveho, and also those that are riding it. V'yordu susim v'roichvehem, that shall sink down the horses and those that ride them. Ish b'cherev ochiv, each through the sword of his brother. We shall come back to comment on these verses. Coming now to the Hebrew of the last verse. Bayoyim hahu ne'um Adonai tzevaos ekochacho Zerubbabel ben Shaltiel avdi ne'um Adonai ושמתיכו כחויסום, כי בחוב אוכלתי, נאום אדוני צבאות. The entire focus of the prophecy concludes with the figure of Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, from the offspring of King Jechoniah, from the royal house of David. And Zerubbabel is called God's servant, and God will put him as a seal for you have I chosen, says the Lord of hosts. Let us look again at these concluding verses addressed in the second prophecy of that day to Zerubbabel. Emor el Zerubbabel Pachas Judah, say to Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah, saying, and he addresses him in his official title under the rule of the Persian Empire, but that is not going to last, because God is going to shake the very heavens and the earth. Well, let us follow here the commentary of Metzudat David on these verses. Here coming to verse 21, Ani marish, I'm shaking the heavens. This means, this wants to say that this house, I'm warning you from the very outset, this house will not stand forever. Ki ani marish es hashamayim, I'm shaking the heavens. Ki ilu kachvei shamayim mimesilasam yilachamu bahem. It will be as if the very stars of the heavens in their tracks will be fighting against them. And the kings of the earth will be gathered to come upon them, prophesying across the 420 years for which the temple stood, where first it was the Greeks that came against them and defiled the temple, and finally the Romans that destroyed the second temple. And continuing now with verse 22, but I shall overturn the throne of the kingdoms. But in the end I shall take from them vengeance. I will overturn the throne of all of the kingdoms, and I shall destroy the strength of the kingdoms. V'yeru, they will go down, says Metzudat David, they'll go down, be'imkei ha'sha'ol, down into the depths of hell. Ish becherev ochiv, each through the sword of his brother. Mehumas Hashem tova behem, the tumult and utter devastation from Hashem will come in them and upon them. They will be killed, one at the sword of his brother. One nation will rise up against the other, and in massacres and bloody wars, they'll all kill each other off, as it's written in the prophet Ezekiel chapter 38, specifically speaking about the war of Gog and Magog. I have called forth the sword of one man against his brother. So we see how the sweep of the prophecy, the horizons of the prophecy of Haggai reach to the very end of days, according to this interpretation of the Metzudat David. And finally on verse 23, Ekochachoz Rubavel, this wants to say, Ekach ish mizar acho, I shall take a man from your seed. Va'al haMoshiach yomer. And this is being spoken about the anointed King Mashiach, for whom we await. V'samticho k'choisam, I shall put you like a seal. K'moshe ein choisam atabaz zoz miyad odam, just like the seal on a ring never moves from the hand of a man. A important personage, a king, a minister, has his seal that he will not let fall into the hands of anybody else. It's always on his hand. So too, my love shall never turn aside from him, from the Messianic King. For you have I chosen, Bezera ayoytze memecho bocharti liyos hu melech HaMoshiach. In the seed that comes forth from you have I chosen that he will be King Moshiach. Well, now, just to complete the understanding of some of the overtones of this verse, looking now at Rashi on this concluding verse, the significance of the issue of Zerubbabel being placed like a seal. Says Rashi, Klapei shenigzar al Yechonya Aviv. This is alluding to and counterpoint to what was decreed against Yechonya, the father of Zerubbabel. He was his father's father. Zerubbabel was the son of Shaltiel. According to some accounts, Shaltiel himself was the son of Yechonya. According to others, Shaltiel was the son of Pedaiah, the son of Yechonya. Either way, Yechonya could definitely be called the father, an ancestor of Zerubbabel. And it's written in Jeremiah chapter 22, in his reproof against the last kings of Judah, the very searing reproof against Yechonya specifically. There in Jeremiah 22 it says, Chai ani. This is an expression of an oath where God is swearing in that verse in Jeremiah. Im yehyeh kanoyu ben Yehoyakim chaisam al yad yamini. Even if Kanoyahu, which is the same as Yechonya, even if Kanoyu ben Yehoyakim, the son of King Yehoyakim, the son of Yoshiyahu, even if he were a seal on my right hand, Misham atkenecho, from there I would remove you. And there, in the prophecy of Jeremiah, Oimer Sham kisvu eso isha ze ariri, inscribe and write the name of that man, King Yechonya, to be childless. We learn from the contrast between the verse in Jeremiah and now the closing verse of Haggai that the teshuvah, the repentance of Yechoniah when he was taken into captivity in Babylon, and as we heard at the outset that he was placed in solitary confinement in a deep pit, and only through a miracle became it possible for his wife to be lowered down, and when she showed menstrual blood, he refrained from even touching her, and miraculously she was able to purify and was lowered down a second time, and from that from there came the issue of Pedael, Shaltiel, and Zerubbabel, and therefore, whereas King Yechoniah had not observed the laws of purity when he was king in Jerusalem, there in solitary confinement in Babylon, he repented, and his repentance, in the words of Rashi, availed him. And there was born to him the issue of Zerubbabel, who was placed like a seal on God's hand. So we have the absolute promise of God Almighty that he will redeem us and send his righteous Redeemer soon, the issue of Zerubbabel. With that, we conclude our study of the Tanakh for today. We'll have a very brief interval and come then shortly to continuing with our study of Likutei Moharan, the first volume of the Hebrew edition, the third teaching. Welcome back, and now carrying on with the second part of our studies today, our study continuing of the Likutei Moharan, masterpiece of Rabbi Nachman, teaching 3 in the first part of Likutei Moharan. Shalom, today the 15th day of the month of Iyar of the year 5778, the 30th day of the Omer count, and the 30th day of the month of April of the year 2018. And we continue in our study of Likutei Moharan, Chelek Aleph, Torah Gimel, the first volume of the Hebrew printing of Likutei Moharan, the third teaching on the singing frog. And we now come today to the climax of this teaching, when Rabbi Nachman comes to interpret the actual Agada of Rabbi Bar Chana, who spoke about this phantasmagorical tale of the Akrukta. And let us now turn to the text of the Likutei Moharan. After all of the introductions that the Rebbe has built, which we shall be actually reviewing as we go through his interpretation of the parable of Rabbi Bar Chana, after all of the previous concepts that have been explained, we now understand what Rabbi Bar Chana said there in the passage in the Talmud. I personally saw that frog. And Rashi here intersperses in the words of the Talmud the explanation of the words by Rabbeinu Shmuel, that is the sage known as the Rashbam. He was the grandson of Rashi, known as Rabbi Shmuel bar Meir, Meir being a student of Rashi who was married to Rashi's daughter Yocheved, and the Rashbam has commentary on the Torah and on the Talmud, and in his commentary on the Agada, it is he who explains that the akrukso is the Aramaic word for a tzfardeya, a frog. Hainu tzipor de'ah. Rabbi Nachman breaks the word tzfardeya into its two components, the root of the Hebrew word a bird and the root of the Hebrew word knowledge. Tzipor de'ah, the bird of knowledge, one that is able to fly up and attain wisdom and understanding. And the narrative of Rabbi Bar Chana in the Talmud continues that what was the size of this frog? Dehavi ki akro dehagronio. The Talmud says that it was the size of a town that was known as Hagronio, Akro dehagronio. Well, Rabbi Nachman now darshans the name of this town, which is given as the measure of the frog, Miloshan Kro Begoron. Rabbi Nachman sees in these words of the Talmud the Hebrew word kro, call out, through the throat. The Hebrew word for throat, garon, is contained in the second name of this town, Hagronia. Hainu she'anegino nimshach mimenu. That is to say that melody is drawn forth from this tzipor de'ah, from this bird of knowledge. He's already explained to us in the main body of the teaching that it is the from the birds of holiness that comes down the melodies of King Messiah, and comes prophecy to the prophets. So The expression that he's quoted here, kro b'garon, in Isaiah chapter 58, refers to prophecy. The prophet is instructed to call out with his throat. So where does the sound of the throat come from? From the bird. Hainu shanigino nimshach mimenu, from there comes forth the melody. And the Talmud goes on, Akra de Hagronia kamahave. Well, what was the size of this town? Shitin Bati, it had 60 houses. So the words of the Talmud here, Rabbeinu Nachman now interprets, Hainu alidei ma tesakem bechinas kro b'garan, through what will you be able to rectify and repair the aspect of calling out with the throat? How will you be able to repair your language? If language has fallen down to the impure birds, you have to purify from the impurity of tzoras, of leprosy. How can this be purified? Alidei shitin bati, through 60 houses. The Talmud had asked, how big was Akrat Agunia? Answered, 60 houses. What are these 60 houses? Hainu alidei shitin masechtos, namely through the study of the 60 tractates of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law. Although we enumerate today 63 tractates, that is because the original tractate Nezikin, which ran to 30 chapters, was divided up later into 3 separate tractates. That is Baba Kama, Baba Metzir, and Baba Basra. And Pirkei Avot is one of the Masechtas, and there is altogether, taking the 3 Bavas, Nezikin as one tractate, there's actually 60 tractates of the Mishnah. Pirush Rabbeinu Shmuel, the Rashbam, explains on those words of the Talmud, the 60 houses, Talmudic Omalo. Here it's the Talmud saying how big was Akrat Hagrunia. Rabbi Barbahana simply said, well, that frog was as big as Akrat Hagrunia, assuming that his listeners knew how big it was. So, according to the words of Rashbam, Rabbeinu Shmuel, that's the Talmud saying how big was the town. And Reb Nachman learns out from the comment, the terse comment of Rabbeinu Shmuel, Rashbam, Hainu sheyilamad Talmud, that the Talmudic Amarla, when it says 60 houses, it's saying, go learn the Talmud. If you want to rectify your voice, learn the Torah Sheba'al Peh in the nighttime, as the Rebbe had explained in the earlier part of the discourse. Also, Tanina below, continuing with the narrative of Rabbi Bachana, there came a serpent or a dragon and swallowed the frog. Perish Rabbeinu Shmuel, Rabak Omala. Rabbeinu Shmuel, Rashbam, in his commentary on the Talmud, he says that this part of the narrative, there came a serpent and swallowed the frog, that is Rabba Bar Bachana talking. Rabbeinu Nachman finds here an allusion in the words of Rashbam to the concept he brought earlier, that there's a problem with the learning of the oral Torah, that a person learns oral Torah with the wrong motive. He wants to be thought to be a brilliant rabbinical scholar. On account of the person learning the Torah not for the sake of the Torah to acquire the wisdom of God, but for the ulterior motive of becoming famous and acknowledged. Rabbi Amar Lo, it's the rabbi, the brilliant rabbi that's saying this. That's the serpent. Yivla oiso anochosh. The frog gets consumed by the serpent. Rabbeinu Shmuel, Rabbi Amala, when Rashbam says that's Rabbi talking, when the person studies in order to be called a rabbi, a teacher, that is swallows up the singing frog, which should have revealed the secrets of wisdom, the bird of knowledge. Asa Pushkanso. The narrative of Rabbi Bachana continues. There came the Pushkanso. Pirish Rabbeinu Shmuel Oirev. The Pushkansa is an expression with the connotation of the raven. And here is a continuation of the series of etzot, counsels, that Rabbi Nachman draws out of this narrative of Rabbi Baba Chana through the interpretation of Rashbam, Rabbeinu Shmuel. Oirev, the suggestion of the Oirev, the black raven, is Hainu arideshe yilmad balaylo. It's necessary to learn the oral Torah in the nighttime, in the wee hours of the morning, after chatzot, before the dawn. Miloshan arvis. Here we have the expression arvis. The orev has the same letters as the Hebrew word arvis, orev, raven, and arvis, the nighttime. Uvalo. Now the raven succeeded in swallowing up the dragon. Hainu omegenalov min anochosh. It shielded the poor frog from the serpent. Uslik yasiv be'ilono. And the raven then went up and sat on a tree. Pirush Amar Shor. Here Rabbi Nachman turns to another commentary on the Talmud, a much later commentary of the 1700s of Rabbi Shmuel Edelus, who was one of Rabbi Nachman's favored teachers. And the Maharshor, as he's known, explains that this ilana, this tree, Ubechinas Avrom, that is Abraham, our father. Because of Etzloi Vayita Eshel, by Abraham, Genesis chapter 21, it writes that Abraham planted the tree of hospitality, the Eshel tree, Shehu Bechinas Chesed, and this is the aspect of loving kindness, embodied in the archetypal figure of Abraham. And here Rabbi Nachman finds the allusion to what he'd spoken about earlier, how through studying the oral law in the nighttime, the thread of kindness that is drawn down upon the person that rises early to study Torah before daybreak, a thread of kindness is drawn upon that person. Megin alav min anochosh, that is what defends him from the serpent. Come see what is how great is the power of the tree. The conclusion of Rabbah's narrative is, when saying, see the great power of the tree, he is expressing his amazement. How great is God's kindness, that even against this thought that one studies the Torah to become acknowledged as a rabbi, there is a way to find a defense against that false motive for studying the Torah, and that is through studying the Torah in the wee hours where nobody else is about. And as Maimonides says in the laws of studying the Torah, that is the time when a person receives their main wisdom. Through all of the above, we can now understand the semichus, the adjacency of one item to another in the Mishnah in the later part of chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot, the chapter of the Fathers. Make for yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a Havir, literally a friend, a fellow to whom one is attached. The heavy done is called Odom Kafschus, judge every person in the scale of merit. Explains Rabbi Nachman, Ki alideshe shomei negino kanal, hu mesaken binyan hamalchus shaloi. On account of the person's hearing the melody, as we would explain above, this is the holy melody that is built up through the chants of the study of the oral Torah with its chants of the Mishnah and the Talmud. The person thereby rectifies the structure of the person's own malchut. A person's own malchut is their own acceptance of God, their own acceptance of God as the king, leading to the person to successively negate their own will before the will of God. And all this is done through the chants and the music and the melody of the oral Torah. That's what builds up our acceptance of God over us, through tracing through in each of the different commandments of the Torah, each of the different laws of the Torah, how through the Talmudic discussion we come to the halacha, which tells us what to do. It's through the study of the intricacies of the oral law that we build our malchut. This explains the first component in the Mishnah from Avot: make yourself a teacher. One has to repair the malchut. The Hebrew word rav really means a master. The original meaning, the root meaning of the word is great, rav. So one acknowledges their greatness over one is their master. And a rabbi is not the same as a professor. The rabbi is a master whose conduct, whose piety, and whose Torah teachings in the backdrop of that piety and righteousness makes him one's master. And through that, by accepting the authority of the Torah as embodied in the Torah teacher, thereby we repair the malchut, we accept an authority over us, the authority of the Torah. This is accomplished through acquiring for yourself a chaver. The Rebbe is explaining why one element in the Mishnah follows the other, and he sees each element in the Mishnah as being a counsel, etzah. This is Rabbi Nachman's way to draw out practical counsels for the service of God. Well, how do you make yourself a rabbi, namely accept malchut? This is through kaneh lecho chaver, hainu alidei koneh. It's through the kaneh. The Hebrew word kaneh, acquire, is the same root letters as the word kaneh, which literally means a reed, and is applied to the windpipe, shehakol yotze mimenu, from which the voice emits forth. And the counsel is kaneh lecho chaver, the kaneh, the windpipe, that will be the chaver that will join you. Through the windpipe that the voice emerges from it, through the voice and the sound emitting from the windpipe, one joins together the two cherubs. As we saw, the cherubs are the same concept as the birds, which are the source of prophecy, and we join the two cherubs together, the aspect of Ze'er Anpin and Nukva, the small countenance of God, and the feminine aspect, which are now joined together face to face, K'ma'ar ish v'eloyos, like the attachment of a man bound together. This is an expression from Book of Kings describing the engravings on the walls of the inside walls of the Holy Temple, the embossment on the gold of male and female figures facing each other. And all this is emblematic of God and Knesset Yisrael. When Israel does the will of God, that's when the Ze'er Anpin, the small countenance, comes face to face with his nukva, with his feminine aspect. Now when the person has rectified their own malchut, they become a true prince and princess of the Torah through accepting the kingship of God upon ourselves. Now the person is able to rule over everything they want because their will is always aligned to rule the Torah. Well, that could get dangerous. One could start killing this one and killing that one and giving life to the other if one lets one's malchut go too far. Nimsa olam chorav, that would lead to a world that was destroyed. That is why the third element in the Mishnah, judge everybody in the scale of merit. You have to use your malchut tilted to the side of kindness. We have to judge everybody in the scale of merit. The Almighty does not desire the destruction of the world. Rosheves Yitzoro. Here Reb Nachman is quoting a verse from Isaiah. He did not create the world to be devastated and desolate by everybody going around and killing and massacring anybody that they think has deviated from the path, as is going on in many parts of the world today. Losheves Yitzorah, he formed the universe and the world in order to be a place of sitting and dwelling in a civilized manner. Well, one thing that we see from this section, from Reb Nachman's interpretation of the Agada of Rabbi Baba Chana, is how very closely connected is this idea to Rabbi Nachman's teachings about finding the good points in all. This is where this teaching now ends. At this point, where we should be living it today, Rabbi Nachman has already come to the key phrase in his teaching in Likutei Moharan, Volume 1, Teaching 282, known as the teaching of Azamara. He quotes this exact verse: we have to judge each person favorably. That is done by finding the good points in everybody. And it is from this that the melders indeed are made. So we see that all of these teachings are joining up and leading to the same place, to vital lessons for us in the service of God. With that, my dear friends, we end our studies for today, and with the help of God, I shall be back on Thursday, this Thursday, which is Lag BaOmer. And it is my hope that we will continue with our regular Kollel studies, so that it is the celebration of the life and influence of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It is appropriate to do the one thing that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai emphasized above all, and that is the study of the Torah, which leads to Geula. So God willing, we shall be back on Thursday. Look forward to being with you. And with that, I wish you great bracha and hatzlacha, blessing and success in all you do today and in the coming days in this very, very special week, culminating with Lag BaOmer on Wednesday night and Thursday. Shalom from the holy city of Jerusalem, from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh.